What was the first game you really got into? And I don't mean one of the first games you played or one of the various games you played when you were a kid. I mean, what was the first game you really sat down and dedicated yourself to playing and finishing? The first game that really immersed you through gameplay, story, world, characters, or something else. You see, in a previous video, I briefly discussed the concept of core childhood video games. Similar to core memories, I believe that they are games that, for one reason or another, we remember very fondly. These games have had a lasting effect on us, and whether we realize it or not, they have gone on to influence some of the interests that we have today. Among those core games, I believe there's at least one game that sits above the rest. A game that holds a particularly special place in your heart and really opened your mind to the world of video games. You might be thinking that this is just a fancy way of saying, what's your favorite game? But this is more than that. This game is a medium-defining game for you and is unique to everyone for a variety of reasons specific to them. Whatever it is for you, I can wholeheartedly tell you that Devil May Cry 3 is that game for me.
Want to know the name? Devil May Cry.
So yeah, in the video I made a while back on the Netflix Devil May Cry series, I mentioned that I was a big Devil May Cry fan, and I was not exaggerating when I said that. Like, I need you to look me dead in my eyes when I say this. Oh, wait, hold on, I want to properly illustrate this. I need you to look me dead in my eyes when I say Devil May Cry, and Devil May Cry 3 especially, was one of the major video game pillars of my childhood. Unfortunately, the Netflix series, while it did some things alright, got several major themes and concepts from the original series completely wrong. So, seeing how the Netflix series so thoroughly massacred my boy, I was filled with an overwhelming urge to correct the wrongs that had stained my eyes as I watched that series. Therefore, outside of wanting to wash the taste of that mess out of my mouth, I want to properly explain what I think makes the original series so great and why I love it so much. I thought about centering this video on the first game, but I felt like I didn't have enough to talk about it that hasn't already been said, and who knows, that might be the case for this video too, and 2 just sucks, so 3 was the only real choice. Plus, while my fascination with the series did start with the first game, my obsession wouldn't truly awaken until I played Devil May Cry 3, as it's not until the third game that I believe all the elements of the series up to that point truly clicked. And what I mean by that is, the first game was the start of an idea, as most first entries should be. It was a darn good start to a darn good idea because the first Devil May Cry is a great game, with its mix of gothic atmospheric horror, solid action and combat, well-designed levels and environments, and so on. Unfortunately, its execution of all those ideas was just a bit flawed, as some of them seemed as if they weren't properly fleshed out. One could say that this was because it had too many good ideas, and due to the time period it came out in, and the fact that it was built off a concept that was meant to be something else, those ideas just weren't given enough time or room to grow. Usually, that's where the sequel would come in. Any good sequel game should be an expansion of the ideas started in the first game, broadening the concepts that are already there, and adding new concepts to keep things interesting and new. But unfortunately, Devil May Cry 2 failed at almost every step of that, and is an affront to sequels and really just games in general. So that left all the weight of not only bringing back a series that had nearly been ruined by its previous entry, but also properly pulling together and expanding on all the concepts and ideas started in 2 whole games that came before it, to Devil May Cry 3. Now that would be a tall task for any game, and you would be lucky for a game to do even half of that. But my good man, Hideaki Itsuno, said, "Hold my beer. I'm about to redefine the genre I made because Devil May Cry 3 did all of that and more." It perfectly brought together everything good about the previous entries, took it all to a new level, brought it back in line with what the first game started, and completely revitalized the series. It also sparked the trend of the DMC series learning from their mistakes, taking what was good from each entry and improving upon it, and learning from what was bad and either taking it out or reworking it to better fit in the next game. DMC 3 was the series' first real steps into straight action. While not fully letting go of its horror roots, still keeping much of the series' gothic horror aesthetic, and personally I think that's when the series was at its best, the steps it took in 3 were some pretty big ones and would go on to influence the rest of the series going forward. With DMC 1 and 2 setting up the bones of the combat and movement in the series, Devil May Cry 3 took those bones and basically structured the whole game around them. Though, personally, I think there's really just one mechanic that almost all of the gameplay revolves around, and that's these seemingly arbitrary letters you see in the right of your screen here. While the style meter may have been in the 2 previous games, it was never a major focus. It was more of a background element that congratulated you from time to time for hitting multiple enemies at once that quickly faded away before you even realized what style rank you had. It was hard to even get a high style rank in those games anyway, with their limited combos or just lackluster combat. I believe Devil May Cry 3 changed this, however, by properly incorporating the style meter and building the combat around it. With a properly incorporated style meter, the game incentivizes you to get higher and higher style rankings with your combos as you fight. How do you get better combos? By varying your attacks, switching weapons, shooting, moving around, dodging, and doing everything you can to avoid taking damage. Because taking damage doesn't just mean losing health and possibly dying in Devil May Cry. No. It means losing that S to triple S rank combo you just burnt a hole in your controller to get. And there's no greater frustration than losing all that style rank when you take a hit, and it's almost insulting when that attack comes from some low-level demon. But now, the challenge has been set. They knocked you out of your combo, so now you have to get it back and gain that S rank style again. It is this, in my opinion, that makes the combat in not just Devil May Cry 3, but really the whole series so great. Instead of just throwing you into some combat scenario and telling you to kill every enemy on screen, DMC actively pushes you to get better combos and vary your playstyle every time you fight, as well as punishes you for just spamming attacks. Now granted, you can still cheese the style system if you really wanted to, because the game naturally rewards you for doing high damage moves and hitting multiple enemies at once, but anyone who respects the game should naturally want to avoid this and want to master the combos for each weapon. Now despite how combo heavy DMC3 is, the basic combat is actually pretty simple. While every weapon has their own unique movesets, they all ultimately have an A combo, a B combo, mid-air attacks, and directional input attacks. The only weapon that kinda breaks this is Nevin, but Nevin is supposed to be the weird weapon of the game with a moveset unique to it. You won't truly realize the complexity of the combat until you start fully understanding what I believe to be the 3 core traits of combat in Devil May Cry: melee, guns, and agility. Utilizing the seamless weapon swapping mechanic, understanding how each weapon's moveset can flow flawlessly into another, knowing how to use your guns to support and extend your combos, and being able to fully make use of Dante's agility during combat are all important for not only avoiding damage, but also keeping yourself in a combo. And what pushes all of this even further are the styles, an honestly ingenious system that allows you to cater your playstyle to the major aspect of combat you enjoy the most without compromising on any of the others. Swordmaster is great for everybody who enjoys the melee combat and wants to push their combos even further. Gunslinger does the same, but for the guns, giving you more options for anyone who likes to shoot their way through each combat encounter. Trickster, probably the most beginner-friendly, feeds into Dante's agility, giving you several acrobatic moves to dodge and assist in combat. And Royal Guard, the trickiest to properly use, introduces blocks and counters into DMC, requiring skill, however, to use effectively. And of course there's the 2 others, Quicksilver and Doppelganger, which add some cool gimmicks into the mix. It all leads to combat with incredible depth, and it not only makes the skill curve to playing Devil May Cry fairly easy to navigate for new players, but it also makes the skill ceiling incredibly high for all the seasoned players. And with things like your style points, how long you take to finish a mission, item usage, collected orbs, and so on, all getting judged and ranked for your total end of mission ranking, it pushes you as a player to want to improve either in the next mission or to go back and get a better ranking on that same mission, giving Devil May Cry incredible replayability. Now, of course, combat wouldn't be nearly as fun if you didn't have good enemies to fight, and DMC 3 has one of my favorite rosters of enemies and bosses in the series. Ranging from your average punching bags to requiring specific tactics to beat, each enemy introduces a new potential attack and or gimmick to keep track of during combat. Now, these gimmicks do make some enemies more than a little annoying to fight, but ultimately they keep you on your toes and they prevent combat from getting stale, as you can't just button mash your way through each combat scenario, which feeds nicely back into the whole style meter mechanic. Though it's not like the game would just let you coast by even if you wanted to, as the game made sure to put several walls in the form of bosses in your way to make sure you can actually play the game. The bosses can act as some pretty tough progression walls, as they check to see if you know how to actually handle yourself in a serious fight, and that you're properly using the mechanics the game has taught you up to that point. These things aren't unique to DMC3, these are just examples of good game design. Bosses like Agni and Rudra check how you deal with two tough opponents at once, Nevin checks your ability to deal with wide-sweeping barrage attacks, Beowulf checks how you deal with an aggressive, heavy-hitting enemy, and Cerberus tests if you're playing on the right difficulty. That last one's not even a joke. Cerberus, very fitting for his role, was and still kind of is a legitimate gatekeeper for some people trying to get into this game. Some of you may even know that the original Devil May Cry 3 on the PlayStation 2 had a problem with its difficulties. Since many players complained about how easy DMC 2 was, Capcom decided to tweak the difficulties a bit for DMC 3. Every difficulty was a step higher than it should have been, meaning normal was hard was very hard, etc. So many of us, including myself, had to suffer this insulting message fairly early into the game, and I still refuse to play on easy out of principle to this day. And this was only done for the Western versions of the game, by the way. It wasn't until the Special Edition was released that the difficulties were brought more in line with what they traditionally should be. You know, I think I'm starting to notice a pattern with Japanese action games and their difficulties. Despite all of that, the difficulty progression of DMC3 is actually pretty darn good. While much of the game's initial difficulty comes from it throwing you right into the action and kind of keeping up that tempo for most of the game, once you adjust and start to get a handle for the controls in combat, it really just comes down to you mastering the combos and the style moves and how they interact with each other. More likely than not, you're not going to be able to do this in one playthrough, which encourages you as a player to want to play again on hard and beyond. Each successive difficulty brings the usual things you'd see increased on the higher difficulties of an action game. Higher enemy health, more damage, changes to enemies during combat encounters, and so on. Thankfully, you get to keep all the things you obtained from the last difficulty you played on. There's a good chance you aren't able to upgrade everything in the last campaign anyway, which gives you plenty of time to hone your skills and really understand each weapon. And trust me, you'll really want that time because everything changes once you hit Dante Must Die. Not only do enemies become much harder to kill than on any of the other difficulties, they attack way more frequently, deal significantly more damage, and they also gain a Devil Trigger. Much like your own, enemy Devil Trigger gives them greater damage resistance and makes them harder to stun and knock down. This Devil Trigger activates either after a certain amount of time passes or a certain number of enemies have been killed. So this means you won't be able to approach combat quite how you normally would. You'll have to start fighting smarter. Enemy prioritization will become a genuine strategy, as you may want to take out a particularly tough enemy first before it can Devil Trigger and get even worse, or divert your attention to the newly spawned enemies that have yet to Devil Trigger. Honestly, the only real way I've ever managed to play on Dante Must Die is by using the Super Dante costume. Called a crutch, but that unlimited Devil Trigger is basically a requirement. With how hard enemies hit on DMD, you practically need the extra damage reduction and stun resistance from your Devil Trigger to survive. And that's not even mentioning how long fights would take if I wasn't doing extra damage. There is a reason why you unlock the super costume the same time you unlock Dante Must Die. My crutch aside, despite the absolute difficulty of Dante Must Die, it never feels impossible. Unlike the highest difficulties of other action games like Master Ninja from the Ninja Gaiden series that are just the purest definition of difficult, DMD feels more like a difficulty that you worked your way up to and earned. As a reward, the game stops holding back and shows you a whole new mechanic, more enemies, and even new enemy and boss attacks, all to give you the opportunity to use everything you've learned up to that point and really put your skills to the test with one final challenge. Dante Must Die is actually the preferred difficulty of most veteran DMC players, since enemies are more tanky on that difficulty. It allows players to just absolutely wail on them and do more combos on them before they end up dying, which makes it more fun at the end. I mentioned near the beginning of this video that Devil May Cry 3 was the game that properly brought together all the concepts and ideas introduced to the series up to that point. Well, that didn't just stop at gameplay, because Devil May Cry 3 is perhaps the most thematically heavy game in the series, and that is thanks to its fantastic character-driven story. Prior to DMC 3, the themes of the first game introduced and the burgeoning characterization of Dante as the main protagonist were kind of underdeveloped. Again, DMC 1 introduced a lot of good ideas, but because DMC 2 seemingly had no understanding of the story and themes of the first game or who Dante was as a character, all those great ideas never really got off the floor of the first game. It really cannot be understated how much DMC 2 nearly ruined this series. So this left DMC 3 in a tough predicament. Building off of 2's story would have been difficult given how much players hated it, its lack of a decent narrative, and how terribly it connects to the first game. But it couldn't just ignore DMC 2 and act like it never happened because that would be very jarring. So rather than trying to build on top of the shaky foundation left from DMC 2, DMC 3 decided to add more detail and clarity to what was already there by acting as a prequel, basically cleaning up a lot of the narrative clutter left from the previous games and creating a proper framework for the rest of the series to work off of. However, that meant Devil May Cry 3 had to walk the very fine line of not only reintroducing the series while not completely starting from zero, but also properly adding to the story started in 1. More specifically, they had to reintroduce the core theme of If a Devil May Cry. And it did all of that by centering the entire game around Dante and how he embodies and struggles with that theme. Now, I realize how easy it is to see Dante as just wacky woohoo pizza man due to his goofy nature, but if you take the time to really pay attention to his dialogue and what he does throughout this game, as well as the sequels, you'll see that under all that nonchalant swagger is a deeply conflicted character. Of course, you wouldn't know it from just playing the games, at least the first two. While Dante may have been the main character for the 2 whole games that came before this one, this is the first and honestly the last in the series that really explores him as a character, as unlike the previous games, the events of Devil May Cry 3 very directly involve him and his past. With DMC 3 being almost like a soft reboot of the series, we get introduced to a bit of a new Dante. He still has that effortlessly cool swagger that has made him one of the coolest characters in gaming to this day, but unlike the laid-back, nonchalant, yet caring demon hunter he is in the other games, we get a younger, more jaded and selfish Dante in this game. A Dante who, under that bombastic, carefree personality, really doesn't seem to care for much of anything outside of killing demons, not even himself. Because you see, this is basically Dante at his lowest. With the scars of the tragedy that tore his family apart still very fresh for him, Dante is left unsure of who or what he is at this time. Being half demon, he shares a nature and power with the same demons that destroyed his family, which he completely rejects, along with his connection to his father. But because of that same power, despite also being half human, he feels like he doesn't have the right to be called one. This is the main conflict that the whole game revolves around, and the one that defines Dante as a character. Not just in this game, but throughout the whole series. While the fun-loving demon hunter he portrays himself as is very much who he is, it's often used as a mask to hide the constant emotional pain he feels from the many tragedies he's suffered through. Not to get back on my dislike for the Netflix series, but it's those details that series got so wrong. They only took the surface level details of Dante's character, but didn't bother to understand or portray any of the why. We really don't learn much about Dante in that show. Yeah, they showed the tragedy of his family, but they did nothing to show how it formed him as a person. Even more tragic is how little they understood Lady's character. Lady's story is as important as Dante's, as they both have major impact on each other through the course of the game. Being one of the few people who can directly relate to Dante, with her family also being destroyed by evil, Lady's hell-bent mission to kill her father is what changes Dante. As he interacts with Lady, he begins to understand her convictions and her drive to finish her mission no matter what. Despite the fact that she was a victim in all of this, and it was in no way her fault, because such a wicked evil was unleashed onto the world from her family, from her father, her blood, Lady feels a need deep down in her very soul to rid the world of the wicked evil that was born from her bloodline. Even if she's realistically not fully equipped to truly handle all the challenges ahead of her, she still has to try. The only problem is that determination is useless if she herself is not strong enough to see it through. Dante, on the other hand, was in the exact opposite position. He had great power, but there was no purpose behind it, and outwardly rejected the origins of it. But through his interactions with Lady, he starts to realize the importance of the power given to him by his father and what it was used for. Once Lady sees that Dante truly understands her and what she's fighting for, she entrusts her convictions to him. By the end, she learns to rely on others when something is beyond her strength. And Lady accepting that while he is half demon, he is also half human and capable of shedding tears for and loving others is the outward expression of the growth and conclusion Dante comes to by the end of the game. As important as Lady is to Dante's development, she still only comes second to the man who personifies not only the duality of Dante, but also what it means to be a rival. Virgil is at the pinnacle of rival bosses, and I could honestly make an entire video on him alone to explain as to why. While Virgil certainly isn't the first rival in video games, pretty sure that title belongs to Blue from Pokemon Red, Virgil basically wrote the book on what it means to be a rival. Acting as the other side to Dante's coin, he is the precise mirror to Dante. From his cold and direct speech, precise no-nonsense approach to actions in combat, his fashion choices, and most importantly, his ideals. While Dante came to reject his demon heritage due to the damage it caused him and his family, Virgil clung to it, believing that the power that came from it was the only way to prevent anything like that from ever happening again. That belief in power is what drives everything he does to the point of his own detriment. Unlike Dante, who slowly grows as the game progresses, understanding the power he holds and the legacy behind it, Virgil is so bent on gaining power that he literally can't see past himself. He believes that as sons of Sparta, it's their right and duty to uphold the power of Sparta. The problem is that he stops at power and never thinks about what that power was used for and the responsibility that comes with it. He selfishly seeks power for his own gain so that he never has to go through the pain of his childhood ever again, and if that means crushing all those in front of him and casting aside his humanity, then so be it. He cements himself in this belief, being completely unwilling to change or grow, as that is the only way forward for him, despite the fact that it is the one thing that is keeping him from moving forward. It's these opposing ideals that cause the two brothers to clash. While at first only confronting Virgil out of a simple grudge, once Dante understands the weight and importance of Sparta's legacy, he cannot stand by and let Virgil pervert the power that was once used to save humanity. While Virgil, refusing to ever be weak again, seeks the power that is rightfully his and will not allow Dante to deny him that power. This complete personified reversal of Dante's character is just one of the things that makes Virgil such a perfect rival. Everything Dante and Virgil do throughout the game is in complete contrast to the other, which puts them in natural conflict with each other. In terms of the game, this gives Virgil a constant presence throughout the story, because, as with any good rival, and for as much of a meme as it's become, he is your motivation. Establishing himself as the target to reach at the beginning of the game, basically taunting you to get stronger for your salty run back in the middle of the game, and by the end, you should have every reason Dante does for wanting to confront Virgil in one final fight and put an end to everything. Now, while all of that is the kind of stuff that puts you in the VIP section of the Rival Hall of Fame, I'd argue an equally important part to a good rival is the actual boss fight. Whether you fight them once or multiple times throughout a game, a rival will always lose points if fighting them just isn't fun or challenging. A good rival fight doesn't just test your skills, they actively challenge you. They look at you, throw down the gauntlet, and say, "Oh, you think you're so good? Let's just see about that." They are seemingly smarter than any of the bosses you fought before and fight with you on your level with weapons, attacks, abilities, and skills similar to, if not better than your own. Almost as if the game handed a controller to an actual person. Fighting is no longer about getting stylish combos. You need to have a good grasp on your skills and abilities to read, adapt, and counter their attacks because they're doing the same to you. Virgil does not disappoint in any of this. His fights are some of the most difficult in the game, especially for first-time players. He attacks you with moves that could be, and eventually do become, part of his own campaign. He even broadens his moveset with new weapons similar to you, escalating each encounter, showing you more of his power with each battle, until the last fight where he completely stops holding back and throws everything he has at you. That final fight is genuinely difficult, especially on difficulties like Dante Must Die, but it is a well-developed, climactic end to the game, and I think it's one of the best final bosses in gaming. And since we're talking about the story and characters, I would also like to give a quick mention to the soundtrack of the game. Aside from having the best soundtrack of the whole series, a lot of the songs with lyrics such as both battle themes and Devils Never Cry actually tell you a lot about the story and Dante if you pay attention to the lyrics and connect them to Dante's journey through the game and the overall story and themes of Devil May Cry. The sequels do this too, but I think it's the most prevalent with DMC3. I'm sure this doesn't really need to be said at this point, but if you didn't know before now, and the gushing I've been doing for this game through the entirety of this video didn't clue you in, Devil May Cry 3 truly is one of the greatest action games ever. It's typically pretty hard to put anything at the top of anything due to the variety of things we have out there and just plain subjectivity. But while there were plenty of action games that came out before it, and there certainly have been many great games to come out after it, Devil May Cry 3 practically perfected the genre, to the point that action games, hack and slash games in particular, would go on to take notes from DMC3. And to be honest, they had to. Devil May Cry 3 not only raised the bar, it became the standard for action games. From mechanics, combat, story, characters, post-DMC3, you would be hard-pressed to find an action game that didn't have some type of idea pulled from Devil May Cry. If you made an action game back in the 2000s and it wasn't a Devil May Cry or God of War clone, then I'm sorry, you just failed as a developer. And it still continues to have an effect today. You show me a good rival in an action game, and I'll show you the influences Virgil had on them. As for me personally, this game, and the series as a whole, has done irreparable damage to me. The amount of years I've spent obsessing over this game that I will never get back is staggering. Genuinely though, it is hard to put into words the full effect this series has had on my life. It's not like it kept me from ending at all, but it's had a pretty major influence on my life because this wasn't just some popular action game to me. This was my game, my series to sit down and get immersed in. And it's for that reason that I had a really hard time writing the script for this. I normally try my best to convey my opinions as best possible whenever I make one of these videos, because I want to post each video knowing that I properly expressed my full thoughts on whatever I'm talking about. But for this one, I really wanted to make sure I did justice and really articulated my love for this game and what makes it so great. Particularly in the story department, which is the part that took me the longest to write, because I know how easy it is to write DMC off as just another action game with over-the-top characters and action. Which is partially true, but the story and the characters are honestly the one thing that elevated it above the rest. While many action games would just put you in the shoes of a cool-looking character and tell you to go kill everything in that general direction over there, Devil May Cry stood above the rest with its surprisingly deep characters and the story that was told through them. And thinking back on it, I think that was one of the things that really hooked me with this game. When I was younger, Dante was the coolest character ever to me. And while he still is now, as I got older, I began to understand the greater depth of his character, which made me appreciate his character and the series even more. Well, that did, and the stylish action. I mean, come on, just look at this. What other game lets you do all this looking this cool while doing it? I know I'm probably like the 10th guy on YouTube you've seen talk about why Devil May Cry 3 is so great, but if you made it this far in the video, then I appreciate you sticking around to hear my opinions on it too. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video and all my other videos over the past year. I know I didn't make the most videos this year. This video in particular was definitely supposed to come out back in 2025, but I'm glad you people were here to see what I did make. And hey, we've got a whole new year ahead of us full of new opportunities and blessings. And maybe some challenges mixed in there too. So let's go make the most of it. I know I've got some plans for this channel that I'm looking forward to, and I'm praying you guys will enjoy too. Either way, thank you all for being here.